Hello, everybody. We're just waiting for a few more people to join the webinar and then we'll kick off. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. By automating the capture, processing and reporting of data from analytic instruments directly into an ELN, companies can increase productivity and improve compliance as scientists spend less time searching for results and making fewer errors associating results with tests. This is the second webinar discussing the integration of the Mestrelab automation platform and the Arxspan informatics platforms in collaboration with CATSI to deliver the first commercial off-the-shelf analytical automation solution. In our previous webinar, Guy Brenchley, Principal Scientist at CATSI, discussed the business benefits of the solution. If you would like to watch this, you can visit our website, www.arxspan.com, and download the on-demand version under the News and Events section. Today's webinar focuses on the technical details of the solution and explores the possibilities for integrating analytical instruments and automating the data processing. After the presentation, there'll be the opportunity to ask the panelists questions. Please feel free to submit your questions through the webinar using the Q&A function. Now I'll pass over to Jeff and Santi.
I know, I was muted. Thank you, Claire. I guess it is my turn to start, basically for chronological reasons on how this collaboration came about. And in a way, it all started really when at Mestrelab we started talking to Bruker about a strategic alliance, which eventually ended up with Bruker becoming a shareholder in Mestrelab in December 2018. And our objective, or what was clear to us as developers of a software platform that handles, processes, and analyzes analytical data coming out of the laboratory, is that we needed to be able to automate and integrate with the instrument as much as possible, and to, by doing that, connect the laboratory, if you like, the hardware and instrumentation part of the laboratory, to the workflow of the scientists that typically these days is a workflow which is basically based on tools such as ELNs, etc. So we started our strategic alliance with Bruker, and then Arxspan came along a few months later, Jeff, right? But that's your story, not mine.
Yeah, so Arxspan had been speaking with Bruker for a while and was fully acquired by Bruker in March 2019. Obviously, with the vision of, bringing in these world-class analytical technologies, and then also the enterprise capabilities of Arxspan. So, with that as context, we wanted to kind of outline some of the key strengths that we see that the two different organizations bring to the table. So since Arxspan was started in 2011, we've focused pretty much exclusively on enterprise tools for data management, 21 CFR 11 and other regulatory compliance, and also multi-site collaborative workflows. For example, workflows that enable CROs to contribute to projects without having visibility into an internal data set, academic collaborations, and just multi-site internal collaborations in general across both projects and also across different disciplines like chemistry and biology. Santi, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, I guess from my recollection, I think you were one of the very first people to bring chemistry to the cloud and to this kind of enterprise solutions. I remember a presentation or a discussion, probably 2011 or something like that, in Cambridge when you first told me about this. So, you know, from our perspective at Mestrelab, I think we're obviously known mainly as a company that develops software to handle analytical data. Handling means processing and doing all the downstream analysis that comes after the acquisition. So different instruments from different vendors, because vendor independence is very much at our core, or at the core of what we develop, acquire data. And when that data is acquired, all kinds of different downstream analysis need to be performed to it. And this is what we are basically about. We had, in the meantime, been working further and further into automation solutions, which means to automate the data collection, integrated with that data analysis, with the objective really of serving it up to enterprise solutions, which the end users of the information would use to interact with the data, or where the end users of the information would most benefit from getting the data. And that made this collaboration, I think, make perfect sense. And I'm very happy that we have done it. And I think it provides something which is, I believe in the next slide, the wording is end-to-end, Jeff.
Yeah, you've got a really good memory, Santi. I had kind of forgotten about that conversation, but it's definitely, I think it's definitely beneficial for our collaboration that we've known each other for so long, and that we've worked peripherally with each other for a long time. So it's always been a pleasure. So the question comes up, you know, everybody talks about end-to-end everything. So let's define what we mean by end-to-end in terms of the context of this discussion. You want users to be able to have a structured workflow for submitting requests for test results, and also for being able to receive those test results back in a way where they can see what the status and priority of their request is, and then also be able to see the resulting data in a familiar environment. And so Arxspan sort of provides an environment that users are in front of in their ELN all the time, and that's sort of the portal into this integration for them. So they start off by submitting a request, and we'll go into this in a lot more detail in subsequent slides. And then the rest is invisible to them. It's basically automatic, and Santi will spend a minute talking about that now.
Yes, I mean, I guess this is our thing. We do the invisible part, you know. And when you think about how we work in research or development in the life science industry and in other industries that use the analytical technologies the most, which are typically the people that we work with, I think ELNs, electronic laboratory notebooks, have become quite ubiquitous. So most people are now working with them. But the analytical instrumentation tends to be something that sits completely removed from this workflow. So it is completely outside the workflow. It still requires a lot of manual steps. Obviously, people have to physically walk a sample to an instrument. That is not something an ELN or an integration is going to solve. But there are a whole bunch of things that need to be done in different systems, probably by users keying data in, etc. And then the data have to, again, manually be handled, collected, and somehow somebody, maybe an analytical scientist or maybe the requester of the analysis, need to somehow get it back into the ELN. Typically, in most cases, I think probably in a PDF format, which is pretty dry and does not allow you to do much with it. So basically, the way we see end-to-end, or when the requests come to us from the Arxspan ELN, what happens is that we know the instruments are going to be running and acquiring data that relates to a specific request from a scientist, which exists as an entity in the ELN associated to an experiment. So our automation can listen to NMR instruments, LCMS, GCMS, optical spectroscopy instruments, and as those instruments write the data up, as they finish acquiring that analytical information, we can basically pick it up in full automation, and we can do analysis, processing and analysis to it. And that can be many things, from just doing a basic processing, maybe some integration on NMR or something like that, and generating a basic report, to much more complex workflows, where you may even, for example, have tolerances that mean that if you fulfill some criteria, you send a given notification to the user, and if you don't, you trigger a different process. So we basically do this automatic analysis, which is basically really just leveraging all the capability we have built into the Nova tools for many years, which now we have fully automated. And at the end of the process, with this integration, we now have the ability to say to the Arxspan ELN, hey, here is the data that you asked for, and this is the experiment and the request that it belongs in. So it means that nobody has to do the donkey work of running around, operating system data shares, trying to find data that they requested earlier on. And of course, they get it immediately and in real time, because as soon as we finish, we give it to the ELN, and I think they get probably notified.
Yeah, that's right. So on the enterprise side, the data come back to us through our REST API, which is open and documented. And that allows us to hook into our notifications infrastructure, which is very robust and configurable. You can hook into things like an approval process, which is optional, but this allows the user also to not be having to repeatedly check their screen. They automatically get an email notification that their data are available, and then they can log in and do whatever they want with it as a next step. So during the course of the slide presentation, we're going to weave in a demo, a live demo. So let's switch over to that right now and actually submit a request. So this is the request form. It's a request for Analytical. I'm the requester. I can optionally submit or link to an experiment that I've run. And then I can submit which tests I want to have run. Now, this is these forms are very configurable. This is a really basic one. However, it is one that is being used by a customer, so it's realistic. You put in your tests. You can have as many of them as you want. You can bring them in from an Excel file if you like to. And then when you save the request, you get a sample ID. The sample ID is what is used to pass over to Mestrelab, and then that's also what's used to pass the data back into the API. Santi, before I move on, is there anything else that you'd like to add here?
No, I mean, I think it's worth, of course, mentioning that this is a web tool, which is what I think is pretty cool, because it means that nothing needs to be deployed or installed at the end user's machine or terminal, right, at the end user's computer. So that brings a lot of flexibility and ubiquitousness, I think is the word, which I don't really know how to pronounce in English, but never mind, I tried it, into the system. And I mean, I think we'll talk in a minute about what's behind the covers, so I will not do that now. But basically, once this sample ID and request IDs are generated, they go to the instrument, and we will later pick them up. And these codes that you can see here in the screen is what we will use to say to the Arxspan ELN, hey, here is your data back, and this is where it needs to go. But I think we will talk about more of that detail later, so we can carry on and go back to the presentation, I think.
Great, sounds great. And during the presentation, our data will be processed for us. So we wanted to talk a little bit about, the different pieces that Mestrelab and Arxspan bring to the table here. And we won't bother reading the slide to you, but it's actually a funny story. As you can tell by the dates, Santi and I have been working together now more formally for a couple of years. And Santi had said, we really need to do this. And I was kind of like, well, we have other priorities. We're trying to do some other stuff. And so finally, we connected through one of our sales guys with a customer who was really excited about the prospect of doing this. And that's the cat's eye, the customer in our other webinar. So once we actually decided to put this together, it took only about a month of calendar time and much less development time than that. So it was really easy. And I have to give, I have to self-deprecate a little bit. I give Santi credit for having the vision for putting this together. But it really is kind of an equal contribution of both of our components to bring this workflow to fruition.
Yeah, and I think what's really cool is that, of course, we're using. To me, this was, and I love this "I told you so" moments. To be honest, I'm not on the wrong end of them. But to me, what was obvious is that we both had a set of off-the-shelf tools that were really well validated, and that were already being widely used. In our case, MNOVA obviously is a very widely used processing analysis tool for analytical data. MGears is an automation environment that is now having huge adoption in the industry because it delivers really staggering productivity gains. And you guys had a series of tools that, again, have been used by, I think, many customers very extensively for a number of years.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, it's worked out really well, and it was really smooth integration, which was great. So let's talk a little bit about what's actually happening in the background, Santi.
Okay, so yeah, this I guess is about what happens when that request is generated and the instruments actually acquire data. What we're doing is we're using our MGears module. Our MGears module it gives you the ability to automate anything that you could do manually, or in principle to automate anything you could do manually with the MNOVA software suite, and to conduct any of those workflows to operate on the raw data in automation. And in automation means that you can listen to folders where the instruments are writing the data and trigger a fully automatic processing and analysis when the data arrives. You can also use it in other contexts. So automation to us also means, for example, batch. I may have run thousands of data sets, for example, as a quality control of a library that I purchase or whatever. We can also deploy it in that mode. But in this case, we're using the listen to the instruments and operate when the instruments finish acquiring the data. And what we do is we pick up the raw data, we identify it, because obviously we need to find that request ID or that sample ID that will allow us to put it back in the right place. And then we run a process. And the process, like I said earlier, it could just be a simple report generation, but they can be much more complex than that. There is an extensive list of things that we can do with the data. So for example, we could combine NMR and mass spec data to decide whether we made the right compound or not. So, we use prediction in the background. We know what the NMR and the mass specs should look like, and we can compare it to the experimental data. We may want to do purity, or what we call quantification. So it could be purity or it could be concentration, again, on the basis of NMR, on the basis of LCMS, on the basis of GCMS, or of some optical spectroscopy. And we can also, as part of the automation, we can have the concept of pass-fail processes. So we can have forks on the road, which whether the data fulfills the parameters that are expected or achieves the right result in the analysis or not, then different workflows can be triggered. So for example, the data could be sent to an analytical scientist, an NMR spectroscopist, let's say, if it did not match what we expected. But it could go straight back to the medicinal or synthetic chemist if the result is what is expected. So you can actually trigger these different workflows. We even have customers, for example, using this kind of automation to do as a gateway to registration, where nobody actually needs to put eyes on data, but if the analysis passes, then the compound can be registered and gets a registration number, etc. Which again is something you and I need to talk about, Jeff, because obviously you guys do registration, so we need to have another one of those conversations. And
I'll probably be more open to it this time.
Great. If we may go to the next slide.
Sure.
I think you were open to it at the beginning, to be honest. I wouldn't be too self-deprecating if I were you, but
I just had some other, we had some other things in flight, but yeah, I think that this is working out really well.
Exactly, but I think we both understand now that it is high priority because of the productivity enhancement it can deliver. And I think if you look at the hours saved for a scientist doing what is really useless stuff they did not go to university for, like moving files about. I think the value is very easy to illustrate. So this is a graphic that I just wanted to use to give a bit of an idea of what happens in the background, right? So the instruments write the data, many instruments, different vendors, different techniques, as I was saying. And our automation, MGears, is there watching. You can point it at any different number of folders where your instruments will write the data to. So you can centralize all the data right into one point, or you can have MGears look at one folder, for example, for every instrument. And then there on the right-hand side, you see a little bit what the setup interface looks like. And you can see I have many different analyses there. I mean, if your eyesight is a little better than mine, you can probably read them. I don't read them, but I remember them. So, you can do things like purity, concentration, verification. You can do QC by MS of DNA encoded libraries. You could do a batch release of monoclonal antibodies by NMR, etc. So anything that potentially you can do manually in MNOVA. You have all the different available analyses on the left. You basically just click on them and pass them to the right, which means they will become part of the workflow that's applied to the data. And then when the data is acquired, that workflow happens. And when it finishes, we hand it over to your guys, Jeff. Or let's say to your REST APIs to your application.
Yeah, and so let me just give a little bit of background as to the application that we're running. So the workflow application itself was introduced in 2018 with one of our biggest customers, and it's gotten broad adoption across our customer base, as well as helped us to drive new business since then. As I mentioned before, it's highly configurable. That's not just the forms, but it's also the notifications. Permissions are extremely granular, and everything is done through a browser-based interface by the administrator. So there's no need for services work on our part for standard kind of rollout. And there's more on the back end too, right? So everything that we do at Arxspan is in the cloud, but we recognize that a lot of our customers need access to the data and have other data sets internally that they would like to generate reports from, run machine learning algorithms, use business intelligence tools, things like that. So we have a component called Data Publisher that actually can replicate the data into an on-prem database on an on-change event. So it's near real time. You get an accurate copy with all the revision history of every record propagated back into your own internal database. And as you can see on the slides, we're compliant with pretty much every database that's widely in use today. So it's a really nice technology for not just gathering data from users, but also getting that data to where you want it to be. So let's see. We're going to go through a typical workflow now. We actually already did the first two bullets. We ran, well, I didn't show running the experiment, but we had one. And then we created an analytical request in workflow and linked it to the experiment, the actual synthesis that we carried out. So now you can log into workflow, the analyst can, and look at prioritized list of requests. If you have a special role, you have control over how the requests are prioritized so that you know that the important things are getting done first. And then enter the sample ID. Sorry, Santi, I'm taking over some of yours. I'll just hand it back over to you now.
No, I love it. Anybody else doing the heavy lifting, I'm happy with. That's in fact why we work so much in automation, because you're like my automation today, I guess. So yeah, and basically what's happened after Jeff did that is that Pablo, who is sitting here helping us with the demo, set up a couple of virtual experiments. We are not running an NMR and MS spec at the moment. We're all working from home. So Pablo, I don't think you have one of those. That's probably outside budget, but basically Pablo has taken some analytical data that was acquired by an instrument at a time before and moved it into the listening folders. Now everything else is running at the moment on Pablo's computer for this demo, but typically in a company, in an institution, you will run it on a server, probably with a graphical user interface, so that is most efficient. And the software has picked up the data as Pablo put it in the relevant folders and has done a series of processes to it. I already talked a little bit about the different things that you could do. In this case, we have run a fairly simple workflow because it's probably the easiest to explain, as we will in a minute when we look at the results. And then that was handed over through the REST API to the ELN. And I would hope, Pablo, that the processing finished and that the data were already handed over.
Yeah, everything is finished, and Jeff should have the spectrum, his CLM.
Great. So
great. And I think, Jeff, sorry, I think just the point I should make is that when you see the data arrive now at the CLN, nobody has touched this data. So this is the result of a fully automatic process where nobody has needed to interact with it.
That's right. And in practice, I've gotten an email that tells me that my data are now available. And here they are. So for each test, I've gotten the MNOVA file, and I think Santi will talk a little bit about the contents of the MNOVA file. I've also gotten a PDF, which is much easier for me as an end user to deal with. So I'll pop open that PDF and hand it over to Santi to talk a little bit more about what happened on the MGears side.
Yeah, so as you can see here, I mean, basically, if you just scroll a tiny bit for me, yes, thank you, Jeff. So what we've done with NGears in this case is we have taken, for example, a Proton NMR that was acquired in the instrument. We have integrated it. We have extracted the multiplicity information. So there you can see your doublets and your doublets of doublets, etc. So the full analysis has been conducted. We also picked up the structure from elsewhere. This could be directly from the ELN, or it could be together with the analytical data, depending on how different companies handle their chemical information. And we have extracted a series of parameters that are also published there. And this is a typical report that you will want to have at the end of an analytical process. There is also our company logo, Mestrelab Research, as you can see there. Typically, obviously, each user, each company will have their own logo that will go wherever they want. And this looks in a specific way because, again, we have very simple capability that allows you to set what we call a layout template report. So you can choose in advance how you want your data, not only how you want your data to be processed, but also what you want your data to look like at the end. And whether you want to, for example, export it not only to the MNOVA format, but to PDF, as we can see here. So all this has happened, and we've basically processed, I think, a Proton, but I think if we scroll down, I think in this case, we've also processed a carbon. Oh, sorry, Jeff, just go up for me, just 1 second, sorry, because I missed the bottom of the first page. Just a little bit more there. So there you can see, stop there, please. Yeah, you can see that we've also generated, in this case, I think is probably something like Journal of the American Chemical Society multiplet list, and also a peak list for the carbon-13 NMR. And again, so you can generate all this kind of information, which is really getting you ready for publication, for example, fully automatically. And if we just carry on going down to the bottom of the document now, I think as part of the same workflow, we also handle a 2D NMR. And that's right, we also process a mass spec, but that is in a different document because that's the way we set it up in the first place. It could go to the same document or it could go to separate documents depending on how you want to do it. Now, this is the PDF. The MNOVA file will look exactly the same, but of course, the difference with the MNOVA file, and we probably don't need to go to that, but it is available, is that you will be able to reprocess, to manually interrogate the data, to reintegrate, to reanalyze, to change processing parameters, any further work that you want to do on that data. But the beauty about it is that I would say probably 95% of the time, what you need is what you got. And you know, it's basically saving a lot of fetching data and clicking about to arrive to a result that has been generated for you fully automatically and served up in your actual workflow tool, which is in this case, the ELN.
Okay, great. So that sort of takes the workflow full circle. You know, one of the things that we really want to deliver as a take-home message to this is that we are marketing this and talking about it as a new module because it is a new capability for both Arxspan and Mestrelab and Bruker. But we really want to emphasize, and we already talked about this, that this is not, it's a new module, but it's not new software, right? The M Gears components have been battle tested in production environments at real customers over years of time. The Arxspan technologies have been battle tested at real customers in production over years of time. And what we've done is provide a very thin and robust integration layer. And that's thanks to the fact that Mestrelab and Arxspan both had the foresight to have good APIs to begin with, made this very easy. Easy, in fact, enough so that over the course of about a 6-week calendar time, we were able to go from an initial conversation with a customer, a first customer, to an actual deployed solution. So with subsequent customers, we've been able to go much more quickly than that. And that's due to the fact that this is not really early adopter software. It's just a new integration of 2 pre-existing components. Santi, you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's absolutely right. All the software is off the shelf and was off the shelf before we did the integration, you know. So, yeah, I think it was a relatively simple process, particularly when you consider how complex what you are delivering is, because you know there are a lot of moving parts, and you're taking care of a lot of processes that would not be handled otherwise. So that's what for me is really cool.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. So that concludes what we wanted to talk about. We have some contact information if you want to get more information about the modules. So you can see that listed here. And I think we'll move to the Q&A.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jeff, Santi, for those very interesting talk. First question, can the modules be integrated with other vendor ELNs?
Okay, I guess that's for me mainly. Right. So the answer is potentially yes. You know, if those vendor ELNs have the right set of APIs, you know, there is really no ultimate impediment. I mean, of course, what we have here is the combination of, I think, an environment that we know well on the Arxspan side that we have already done the integration with, of course, so that is a significant advantage. And also, you know, the Bruker connection from some of the instrumentation viewpoints. So I think we probably deliver a very consistent end-to-end experience. You know, with the right kind of ELN, with the right technical capabilities, the same thing could be done. But again, and maybe this is for Jeff to talk about. I mean, obviously, this fits into a series of other tools like workflow, etc., which may not be in what you typically get in a standard ELN. So, you know, that I guess is also where the differentiation is.
Definitely, but I think our interest here is to advance the Bruker technologies as a whole, and I from the standpoint of somebody who has an ELN as a product. The integration was quite easy. So I think that, you know, as long as it's a modern platform, I don't see that there would be any issues.
Okay, thank you. Can it handle plate-based results or plate-based techniques?
I think, Santi, maybe you should start with that as well, and then I can follow up.
Okay, so I guess from my perspective, what I will say is yes, the Gears automation handles plates. In fact, we have a number of applications which are typically delivered through plates. I already referred to some of them, like, for example, the QC of DNA encoded libraries or purity or concentration in automation. So we can, you know, we are very used to deploy automations at our customers already that handle 96 or 384s and multiples of these. And I guess from our perspective, we kind of do the easy bit in a way within this workflow, because we treat each one of those data sets as a single data set. We process it and generate the result. We give it, you know, it has an identifier which is coming really from the Arxspan ELN and tells Arxspan where it lives on the plate, I guess. and we just hand it over, and then the plate is not our problem. Our visualization tools for our automation also handle plates, but in this workflow, I think the plate handling is for Jeff to talk about.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for that, Santi. So on our end, we can accept that data feedback from MGears and then break down, I guess, from the input and also the output side, the composition of the plate. So we do handle plates in our inventory solution. So you can push a plate into a workflow request. And then what happens to the data is going to be more or less workflow dependent once it comes back, because obviously you'll have multiple compounds, probably multiple replicates. You might do some of the data analysis in MGears and then want to do more of a kind of a longer look back in terms of historical replicates that you've processed and see if those are, corresponding in terms of your results. And that can all be done because we have all that data in our database as well. So fundamentally, the support for plates is definitely there, I think, on both sides. Exactly when, where, and how the analysis gets performed and how it's broken up between the two tools, I think is probably workflow dependent.
Okay. So are there live link capabilities between the analysis export and other databases?
I'm going to take a guess at what live link means and speculate that what's being looked for here is that the metadata, both the raw metadata, but also the result metadata that's coming from MGears is published into these other databases. Does anyone else want to disagree with my speculation and put me right on this?
I'm happy for you to continue down that path, Jeff.
Okay. So the metadata are enclosed in the MNOVA file. So we don't currently do this, but it would be fairly easy for us to parse those metadata out of the MNOVA file and publish them atomically into our database. Anything that goes into the Arxspan database then can be published to Oracle LMS NoSQL using the data publisher tool. So I think the energy and the focus there would be on parsing the metadata out of the MNOVA output and publishing it into our search databases, at which time that live link would happen automatically. Santi, is there anything that I said there that you would like to disagree with?
No, absolutely not disagree. I mean, I guess the other point, or maybe the other thing that this may be referring to, is whether once the data is published to the ELN or is in the ELN, you can bring it back and edit it, etc. And that workflow is also supported. So that may be the other way I may understand live link. I agree with everything you answered on your pathway. I'm just adding that other one, and the answer is yes as well.
Yep.
Just in case that's what it was being referred
to. Quick question for Jeff, I guess. How well does Arxspan work with chemical drawing tools like ChemDraw?
So Arxspan works very nicely with ChemDraw, and that's something that we'd be happy to show anytime. Basically, you click in the browser, ChemDraw launches on your desktop so that you have the full capabilities of the desktop version of ChemDraw. You make whatever edits that you want to make, and then those edits are transferred back into the ELN. That's standard functionality for us. If you have a pre-existing CDX or CDXML file that you just want to get into the system, that's as easy as an upload. You don't have to go through ChemDraw for that, and we process it on server side and then display the ChemDraw content back to you in the browser interface.
Okay, cool. One for Santi. Does MGears work with other analysis plugins? Mentions MScreen and StereoFitter.
Okay. Yes, that's a good question. So the answer is, MGS works with anything that MNOVA can do. So the short answer would be yes. Now the long answer is, even though that is really the concept, for MGS to really work in that way, we need to wrap the relevant workflow, the relevant plugin in what we call an MGS brick, right? So that requires that we do a little bit of work on our side, which basically integrates that functionality within the MGS workflow automation tools. That is happening all the time. So you know, every time I talk about MGS, the list of workflows that are integrated in it is larger. I think right now, MScreen and Stereofita, the answer is right now no, but I think MScreen is very close to getting there. And literally we should be seeing something in that space in the next few weeks. And Stereofita, I think, again, is something that will be added very quickly to, or very soon rather, to the brick menu, let's say, or to the brick range.
Okay, that's all the questions we've had from the audience so far. If there are any further questions, then please feel free to email us and we will follow up with you directly. Okay, so Claire?
So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you very much for everyone joining us today. And as Peter mentioned, if you do have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to contact Peter, Jeff, Santi directly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thanks for having me.